I need a documentary on EDG where they have the behind the scenes footage on what the hell the speech was between the two games.
But assuming Sacy does not retire, again, I'll ask you the same question. Do Sen stick together?
If you followed their journey this year, this team was really bad.
Here's my bolster hot take, though.
Sure.
I think he should learn Sentinel.
I mean, we can just talk about Valorant. How you doing? How's your rankings going? Hello and welcome everybody to Cosmic Divide. This is episode 36 and it is the post-champions episode where we will recap everything that just happened to close out the Valorant season in 2024. 2024 is over. Well, not really TMV, but VCT is over in 2024. How are you doing today and what did you think of Champions?
I enjoyed Champions. Yes, the season is not over. We still have 4 Ascension tournaments coming in September, and then there's Tier 2 starts in October, and then Game Changer starts in November. So there's still actually quite a lot to watch about, which is good because that's better than what happened last year, where there was nothing to do for many months.
So yeah, patiently waiting for TMV to upload a video about professional Valorant that's relevant. Not watching some weird tier 3 event or whatever you were doing at that point last year.
I don't know how I survived last year. I actually don't know how I did that, and I don't want to go back and even know. But this year will be significantly easier. But yeah, champs on the whole, I think it was strange because it didn't necessarily feel like the end of the season. It felt like, I don't know, there was kind of one part to it, and I think, partly people talked about this, kind of during the event, that it didn't feel like champs until maybe like the grand final. Grand final kind of felt like champs, but the rest of it I think didn't for some reason. I don't really know why necessarily, because it wasn't that different, but it was the grand final, I think, and obviously it's the most important game. It kind of has maybe undone anything that people might have had complaints about for the rest of the tournament, because the grand final was so good that it was a fitting end. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about in terms of champs, because obviously we're going to get into who won champs and talk about the teams in the final, but as we tend to do on these shows, we'll also talk about the teams that didn't win champs, and maybe what their next steps are, because of course there's a lot of teams that were in the playoffs. We already did one for all the teams who got eliminated in the group stage, but there's a lot of teams in that playoffs who probably thought they should be doing better, to be honest, and they'll probably be quite annoyed that they didn't. And it'll be, we know that the Valorant off seasons are very unpredictable, let's say. Let's see, do EDG, I mean, of all the teams who probably will survive the champs curse, I'd assume that EDG will probably be the most likely, but of course, pretty much every team that wins champs ends up changing their roster. So we'll see. And of course, for these other teams, that's going to definitely happen for some of them.
But before we get into the actual games, I wanted to ask you, I want to put on my little Redditor or VLR user, forum user hat and just say, TMV, can you rank the champs? Because I know for sure that 2021 was the worst. And unless you're a fan of Gambit, not Acend, but if you're a fan of Gambit, 2021 was the best because it was the only time we got to see Gambit play champs. Acend, fluke team,
Rank the champs. That is a good question, though. See, when I think of champs, like 2021, I thought was like, I mean, people can joke about it all they want, and it had controversy in it. But many iconic moments were made in 2021 champs. The people still talk about the crew run as like, one of the greatest things that's happened in Valorant history. So I think 2021 actually, I think is pretty strong. 2022, I think, was a bit more played out, kind of maybe a bit more standard to what everyone kind of expected. Our final was Optic Loud, and they'd already had a final in the first Masters tournament, so it wasn't like everyone thought that those teams were some of the best teams, and it was like, okay, which is good in a way, right? It's good that you get like the good teams being in the final. That's kind of a good thing. But and then last year, I mean, I enjoyed last year's as well, though, a lot, because I felt like EG Paper Rex, like their upper final game between EG and Paper Rex was an absolute banger.
Yep.
And then the grand final as well. That Ascent map when the grand final was one of the best maps of all time. Uh, so that definitely, and the level of play there, I see. It's interesting because this level of play thing keeps coming back, and
Yeah, I had people in my chat yesterday, who I assume are chatters from your stream, being like, "Was the level of play good? Was it bad? Was it?"
we'll get
You
into
know?
that. I think that the thing with the level of play discussion is that the best teams were significantly better than the rest last year.
Hmm.
And I think that just the gap has closed. So when like, EG are fucking pounding someone, with like 5 ults and just destroying them and doing some like crazy mad shit that you've never seen before, and everyone's like, whoa, and look at how good that is. I just think that now the other teams that they're against are smart enough to either not fall into that trap of, or know how to deal with that trap and have their own utility, and they know how to counter it better, so it ends up not being as like, whoa, they just fucking destroyed them, so
Hmm.
therefore it looks less impressive, but really it's just that the other team isn't getting as destroyed because they know what to do. They either don't run into it, they're wiser, or they have a counter to it in their own sense, and so it ends up like, oh, this guy who was kind of crucial to the plan, he just died because they Omen flashed him or whatever, like, that kind of thing happens more. So like,
Yeah.
I do still think overall the quality was probably better this year. Like, these teams are like, especially the playoff teams. Like, the worst playoff teams this year, maybe Tracer's an exception, but like, like G2 would farm everyone probably who wasn't like playing at EG Paper X level in last year's champs.
Yeah. The
Like
way that I would put it is, I would say that EG from last year could have competed very well at this champs.
yes,
Just EG. Maybe
yes,
maybe Paper X, but probably just EG. And then beyond that, every single team in the playoffs here would have probably destroyed, except for maybe FNATIC. But even FNATIC, I don't know. Like, there's like maybe two good teams last year that were like at the level of the teams this year.
yeah. I
Not
think
that they
this
were
one was
bad,
much
not that
closer.
everybody else was bad last year, but the level, I think, sort of like the standard of what is acceptable now in Valorant has gotten significantly higher, as
Yes,
far as like the team
yeah,
play, the fundamentals,
yeah.
even like
Not trolling.
the comboing of people.
Yes.
Um, and I think you kind of see that. Like, for me, a team like Paper X really has not leveled up since last year.
Mm,
They're essentially just the same team as last year, and maybe a little bit more sloppy. Um, but they're essentially just last year's team. But every other team has been like, oh well, if we just if we don't troll against Paper X, like, and we just use our utility and our numbers when we're supposed to, we just beat them because
yeah.
you know
Yeah.
it's kind of
And I
one
also think
dimensional.
people, yeah, when things are close, people think that like when people think of high quality, they think of someone destroying someone else.
Hmm.
Um, but that doesn't mean that like this year, for instance, EDG, right? For the last 3 games, they won 2-1, 2-1, 3-2, right?
Yep.
So they weren't destroying anyone. But that doesn't mean that they weren't good, right? It doesn't
Yep.
mean that they didn't deserve to win or whatever, or that they're not worthy. It just means that in your mind you probably don't think it's like as high a level because they consistently didn't destroy anyone. Whereas people think to like Fnatic at lock-in and they're not losing any maps till the grand final. People
Right.
think of that as like, wow, it's such high quality. But I'm sure if you go back and watch some of those VODs, you'd be like, I mean, I even remember the Sen game of the first game they played against Sen against Fnatic. Sentinels was so bad. Like
Yeah.
like just unbelievably, like laughably bad in that game.
Then you think that, oh, Lock-in had all of the teams, so that was like global esports was there, and
Yeah.
like, DFM was in the tournament, so it's like destroying some of these teams not really that big of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I did want to also just kind of touch on, I think a lot of the discussion around like the level of champs in terms of like the fan enjoyment, people were kind of complaining about like the hype of the event, I feel like, and they were thinking that
Yeah.
maybe last year's was more hype.
Yeah.
And
I think that's kind of
for
fair,
me, it's
yeah.
really hard to kind of distance myself because I was obviously in LA for last year's champ, so
Mhm.
being there, incredibly hype. I thought the studio that they had the first, bit of the playoffs in was pretty cool. I think it was maybe like 2,000 capacity, something like that.
Mhm.
So I think it was probably a little bit bigger than this group stage. But also, I think it's probably important to remember that While Korea is growing in popularity in Valorant, it's actually still one of the smaller regions in terms of like
Yeah.
fandom. So like
Yeah.
in LA, you have a huge fan base, so having a bigger, start to the playoffs makes sense. That being said, I kind of think that the entire playoffs needs to be in an arena personally. Um, having been to three Dota TIs, the group stage is done, like the players are in hotel rooms in Seattle or wherever it's being hosted, and they're playing their group stage games like from the location that the ending tournament is going to be, but they're not in an arena. There's no like crowd for the group stages. But once you get to the actual playoffs, then they do have it in the arena. And, the first couple of days, the arena is like 30% full or less
Hmm.
sometimes. But you actually get to be in the arena. You get to see like the cool stage setup. You get to like experience what it's like to actually watch the esport in a true like sports experience, which I think to me, that's like literally the reason that like converted me into being in esports. Like I'd been a fan of Dota for a long time. Sorry, this is like a very random aside from what we're talking about, but let me just tell you a personal story about my conversion to being an esports fan. Um, but basically, I was a fan of Dota. I had an opportunity to go to TI in 2016. I went to Seattle and I was like a little bit skeptical because I hadn't really been to an esports tournament before. I knew I liked the game, but I didn't really know what to expect. And then I walked into the Key Arena in Seattle and just experienced like the atmosphere from the very first time. I like saw the stage. There was like the music, the sound system, everything before the games even started, and just the whole setup and like the opening, the welcoming ceremony of all the teams. And I was just like, oh my god, like okay, this is real. Like esports is real. It's going to be a very very amazing spectator experience being here, and it was. Um, and so I think giving more opportunities for teams to experience what it's like to play on a big stage like that, even if their crowd is not completely full, um, is definitely worthwhile. And I kind of hope that as the game grows, as it gets more and more globally popular, that they will start doing that. I understand there's like logistics and stuff like that, but I really think it is a bad thing for only four teams to get to experience like a true
Yeah.
arena experience. I think that's really, really going to hinder like the development of these teams because it really is different playing in a studio, which feels kind of just like your regional league, to playing in a literal like stadium. So
Yeah.
hopefully that will be
And I
changed.
think, I mean, Sideshow, I know, talked about like even just opening up lower round two, is just one extra day. Like if they were
Mm-hmm.
so worried about the cost that they really think that they couldn't afford it, like just opening up for one extra day gets two more teams in, gets two more games in a big arena. Because the problem is now, like if we're doing an 8-team Masters to start, which is what they did obviously for Madrid, and it looks like that's what this is what it's gonna be from now, right? It's gonna go
Mm-hmm.
8, 12, 16 to the Masters. Well, the first Masters in Spain, they didn't change arena. They just opened it up a bit more, but it was
Mm-hmm.
still like a kind of like medium-sized arena. It wasn't like a big arena.
Right.
Um, so assuming that that's going to be the case for whatever the first Masters is, that means that essentially in the big arenas, we only get, you know, what, 6 days in an entire season.
Mm-hmm.
So and that it just doesn't feel maybe enough. It just doesn't feel enough. And so yeah, I think especially for champs, like you say, especially for champs, I'd love it. This was my idea for champs, right? Just have it like, because look, I like single limb. I know a lot of people don't like single limb, but I do. Of having it be like the week of champions. Every game is a best of five. It's all in an arena.
Oh
It's
boy,
just
we're off the rails now, TMV.
that's not off the rails. That would be a crazy, crazy good week. That would be a
It would.
crazy week.
It would.
Like every day is just one best of five. There's 7 games to play them all, day after day, grand final on the final day of the week. And then you just, yeah, that to me would be like very different. It would make champs feel very different. Cause I think that's another problem is champs, because of the formats are the same, right? In the playoffs of, the second masters and champs. And especially when you're dealing, like you say, with the small arena until the final 3 games, there essentially is no difference to a Masters, like, at
Yeah.
that point. And especially when you have, like, the Masters was in Shanghai, where the crowd was crazy, and, and the Chinese support seems to be massive, which obviously is good for the game.
Yeah.
But, in comparison, it kind of felt like Shanghai, well, this almost feels bigger than Champs, right? Because the crowd is so crazy. And then
Right.
and you're right that, like, LA, was crazy last year, but I think a similar thing would have happened if it wasn't in LA and was in somewhere where Valorant wasn't as popular.
Or
Tokyo probably would have been, like, way bigger than whatever Champs was as well, because Tokyo
if
was crazy
EG
as well.
wasn't making a run last year, what would have happened? What if it was
Yeah,
like a South
maybe.
American team versus like a Pacific team that like not Paper X or something like that? Who
Yeah,
knows
not Paper
what
X,
the
yeah.
crowd would have been like. It is funny because like I've gone back and watched a few of like the moments from the earlier champs fairly recently, and like seeing Acend win with no crowd, right? Because we were in COVID at that
Yeah.
point. So no crowd. They're just like lifting the trophy, complete library silence. Like same thing with like Turkey had like a smaller crowd, but same
Yeah.
type of thing. Um, the crowd is a massive part of it. And there's been discussions about, miking the crowd better and all that type of stuff. But realistically, the only way you can truly experience one of these is to go to them. Like
Yeah.
the broadcast will never do justice to what it's actually like. So it's hard to be like, this champs was not hype unless you were actually in the stadium and you saw that, like, oh, nobody was cheering. But obviously
Yeah.
people were cheering. They did crowd shots constantly, and like there was a lot of Korean fans that were very, very excited to watch the games. So
Yeah. And Carmine Core, I need you to be good next year. I
yeah.
need you to be good
Yeah.
because I need you to make champs, and I need you to make it to when it gets to the big arena, because the French kind of, like,
Yeah.
football culture chant stuff with drums and stuff is gonna go crazy if
Yeah.
Carmine Core are in the top 4. It
Yeah.
is gonna
No
be the
pressure,
wildest
Ang.
thing
No
you'll ever
pressure,
see.
guys. But yeah.
Yeah, but you got to make the top 4 of
Yeah.
champs. Like, you got to. No pressure, but you got to.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about actual champs then. Let's get into it. Let's start with the grand final, because obviously that's what people will want to hear about most, I suppose. EDG3, Team Heretics 2. Now, my first thing I want to say about this is that, and maybe I've deleted Reddit. I've got rid of Reddit. I don't.
Wow, big moves.
I'm off Reddit. I know. I'm off Reddit. I'm off Twitter. I'm social media. It's gone to me. So maybe I haven't seen enough of the reaction. But to me, just from what I've heard, of people, my chat essentially, stuff like that, it seems like we accepted EEG as champs way quicker, and like it became very normal, like way quicker than I thought it would. Like, if you would have said to someone like, "Oh, EDG are going to win champs,"
Mm-hmm.
before the tournament, they would have thought you were mental, like
Yes.
absolutely crazy. But then
Yes.
it seems like EDG won champs, and everyone went, "Wow, good for
Yeah.
them, good
Yeah.
for China."
No fluke
Not like,
run.
how
No.
the fuck did this happen? Like,
Right.
what the fuck happened to this team? This team was nowhere near this fucking good and has just won champs. What the fuck happened?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is true now that you mention it, because like when I was watching the games and there was like, unfortunately, I'm still terminally online. So I was, looking at the forum and stuff, and there were tons of threads like, Team Heretics is the new Acend. EDG is Acend 2.0. Like constantly these threads of people being like, oh, this is a fluke run, right? And then now that they've won, it's just like, oh yeah, EDG, they won champs. Awesome. Good stuff. Cool. All right, move on. Right. Yeah. It is weird that there's no discussion of like, how did they do this? Is this like the greatest fluke run of all time? I think it's probably because nobody watched China outside of like me, you, and Ryan Central. Basically. Because like honestly, if you followed their journey
Probably is
this
part of
year,
it.
this team was really bad. Like compared to
Yes.
where they were last year, even they were
Mhm.
not good this year. Like yes, they were finishing, in the top 3 and going to the events, but they were not a good team. They were bad at the Masters. They were bad during stage 1 and 2. They were like kind of like squeaking by, beating a lot of really terrible Chinese teams to kind of get their record inflated. They were losing to FPX fairly consistently.
They lost to Wolves in stage
Yeah,
2.
yeah, they looked like they were very lost when they switched back. Okay, so they were experimenting with roles a lot earlier on. KangKang was playing
Yes,
like a
that's
ton of
true.
KO, and Smoggy was their
Yeah.
main duelist.
Yeah.
Um, Once they switched back to having KangKang as like the focus of their team, they definitely started playing better. But yeah, this team went from being like a very average global team. Like I'm talking about like if you put all the teams in like a
Yeah.
lock-in style tournament, this team maybe finishes like 12th, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe like 18th even potentially.
Yeah.
Like they were
Yeah,
not a
genuinely.
good team.
Yeah. Which is great. And again, like there's so many things that I thought just like didn't get brought up, like how fucking crazy it is. Like
Hmm.
I like the comparison would be, think about, no, they changed their fucking IGL and nobody
And
became
their
IGL.
coach.
And yeah, and their coach. Imagine if fucking FNATIC dropped their coach and Boaster, and
Yeah.
Boaster became an assistant coach, and
Yeah,
they brought in
and
some.
Alphier became their IGL because
Yeah, and
literally
Alpha becomes
that's like
IGL, and
nobody's
they
play
bring in
style.
some random from tier 2. Well, let's use Hero as the example. They
Yeah,
bring in Hero as
yeah,
well, and so Alpha's now IGLing. People would be going fucking mad about Alpha. They'd be like, "Holy shit, the best IGL in the world! Holy
yeah,
shit, like crazy! Like this is what nobody did."
yeah,
And like that's crazy, and
yeah.
that is insane. And nobody in these other Masters tournaments this year as well was not doing well at all.
No,
Right? He was not playing very well. He had played well, previously when EDG had done okay, but he was awful. Yeah,
yep,
and then again, I know that people are gonna like talk about EDG and they're gonna say, like you say, like maybe a bit of a fluke run, which to me is bullshit. It's not a fluke run when you go through the oppas and win. It's
yes,
not a fluke one run. You just were the best team.
yeah,
Um, and they're gonna say stuff like, "Oh, it was just their fragging power, right?" Like, "Oh, Chichu, Smoggy, KangKang, they just hit some shots," and that is true as well. That definitely did happen. Don't get me wrong. And we'll dive into the maps and talk about what happened in each one. But that some of their rounds, particularly in the grand final on Sunset and Lotus, were amazing.
yeah,
Like the calling was amazing, and I think what helps nobody is, of course, he has always been a fucking initiator player who's lurking on the other side of the map, and it makes no fucking sense. But actually, now when he does that and he's on the other side of the map, he can call his own fake. He's calling a fake, right? Whereas
yes,
before, I think he was just doing that whatever, and it wasn't really with the plan of the rest of the team.
right,
Now it's his plan. So
yep,
now it makes sense. Like now, when he just drones on B, it's not just he's just droning on B on his own whilst the rest of the team's on A. He's now saying, "Hey, I need a smoke here as well. Let's actually try and run this as a fake rather than me just doing fucking random shit.
right. And he's holding
And
three
hoping that it
people on one
works."
side of the map while the other four hit like the site with only two
Yeah,
players.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it
so
makes coherent sense
yeah,
now, and it works for them, and it was good. Shall we dive into each map, because this was a roller coaster, really, in terms
yeah,
of
yeah. Let's do it.
how it went. Let's start with Haven, which is some of the worst Valorant. Some of these rounds by EDG on this first half, some of the worst Valorant you will see in any region at any time. To be honest, it was god awful. Let me know what you think.
I mean, KangKang was good.
KangKang was good, yeah,
That's about all I got. It was, I mean,
yeah,
this was it really was like it was not just that the Valorant was it was like sloppy from EDG.
comical.
They were definitely like nervous. They were whiffing.
Hmm.
Heretics was playing really well, and it looked like the teams. I mean, I think coming into the grand finals, I had a little bit of a worry that this was just going to be like a 3-0 Heretics because
Yes, I did
Heretics
too.
were a team that had been there before. They were battle tested. They
Yeah,
were not going to crumble under the pressure.
yeah.
And
And some of
EDG,
the Valorant they played against Lev was really good as well in
yeah,
the lows.
yeah,
So
and
yeah, when this happened, I was panicking.
it's like, oh, this is going to be like the worst grand final of all
Yes,
time.
I genuinely did think, oh shit, they're just gonna storm them 3-0.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, and I was just praising nobody, but here on Haven, a couple of things happened. One, I thought it was interesting they picked Haven to
Hmm.
start with, right? Because, and I know, obviously, I know why they did, because Team Heretics played a Sage comp that was dog shit and looked so bad on Haven in
Hmm.
one of their previous games. So I understand why EDG did it, but why they wouldn't have thought, like, there's no fucking way Team Heretics are gonna play that same comp again because it was so bad. Like when it's that bad, like they're going to change comp. Like trust me, no one is going, "Oh guys, we just got to give this another run." Like no, it nothing worked. Literally nothing worked for them. So they were, to me, it was obvious they were going to change comp, which then is like, well, now you don't know what you're running into, and maybe their new stuff is good, right? So I thought that was a strange choice by EDG. but there was a group of rounds, and I do have to say as well, Bren and Sideshow's casting on this first map, they were you could not pick a perfect casting duo more for this first map, where it was sloppy and messy and super chaotic, and it was like,
Mhm.
what the fuck is going on? The casting is unbelievable in this first half. It's so funny. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
Yeah, I
whilst keeping
definitely
it
remember
like
Sideshow
serious.
actively flaming EDG a couple of times. It's like,
Yes, like whilst keeping it serious enough for a grand final, it was also just Sideshow going, what the fuck are they doing?
yeah, yeah.
And it was amazing. It was amazing.
We had a
But
couple
yeah,
like
this.
Melons-esque moments. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
When Smoggy TP to A
yep,
and he didn't plant in time.
yep.
Oh my goodness, there was so many like horrible moments. But this, yeah, it couldn't have gone as bad like as this. This is like the literal nightmare scenario. Which then, as you said, maybe I think before, as we were talking just before, the contrast to map 2 was the biggest swing in performance by a team surely ever for this first half coming out in map 2. What did you think of Sunset?
Yeah, I mean, I had many tweets about this series. And I'm gonna be honest, like there's like a couple of things that really just kind of like perfectly describe this series. And one of which is like, have you seen that locked in anime meme where it's like the guy is like sitting at his computer. I think it's from an anime called Parasite, and it's like, let me see if I can find the tweet actually. Um, I also tweeted out like, I need a documentary on EDG where they have the behind the scenes footage on what the hell the speech was between the two games, because the team that we got in map number 2 from EDG was, I mean, they were just a completely different team. It was not the same team. Here's the meme. You can't see it, but it's like um it's just this guy. He's like sitting, laughing, having a good time, and then all of a sudden he just like gets all serious and locks in, quote unquote. And it's like, I don't know what they did to KangKang. I don't know if he, you know, was hypnotized by like a team mental health therapist or whatever. Like something happened. He was just, and not just him, because he had a
Yeah,
pretty good first map, but
yeah,
the KangKang that came out in map number 2 was different. Like he was different than the first
yeah,
map. He was literally just like, I'm just gonna win every duel. Like it's fine. It doesn't matter where we are in the round. It doesn't matter where we are on the map. Give me one piece of utility. I'm killing this person, and then we're gonna take the site. And it's just like, there was literally just no moment during this map where it looked like Heretics had a chance. Like
no,
absolutely
no,
no chance this entire map. So yeah, just the contrast from EDG looking like bumbling fools to EDG looking like the most surgically perfectly
precise.
coordinated
Yeah,
team was just, I was like, and I'm watching this on Pacific time, so I think this map probably started at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. for me. I'm just kind of like sitting there, like a little bit delirious, like, what is happening?
yeah. Like,
What
wait,
is
it's
this game?
9-0.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I guess we got ourselves a series, but yeah, I mean, first of all, one thing I will say is KangKang's Neon, is
yeah.
his Neon the best in the world? It's very close.
Yes, yeah,
It's
yeah. I mean,
very close.
yeah, it was amazing. Anytime they played Neon, it looked good.
Yeah.
It looked good for KangKang when they played Neon. And look, EDG, I won't forget this. I I remember in their game against Lev, and I remember thinking like, because EDG in the game against Lev in the upper final, they got the last ban, and it was between Sunset and Abyss. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking like, "Oh my god, you've just thrown it away because you've banned Sunset." And even though Lev are good on Sunset, you're the best team. I remember thinking at the time like, "You're the best team in the world on Sunset. You have destroyed everyone. If when you destroy Paper Rex on Sunset, that means that you're insane at Sunset."
Yeah.
And I could not believe that they banned Sunset in favor of Abyss. Now they squeaked out Abyss 13-11, and they just about beat Lev. But then, yeah, they come back to Team Heretics here, and and I think that this was part of it, right? That secretly EDG, like their best map, is actually Sunset, right? Lotus is up there as well,
Hmm.
but their Sunset this whole tournament they've anytime they've played it, they've just no one has got 10 rounds on them on
Yeah.
Sunset. And we're talking about teams who are really good at Sunset.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they just absolutely farmed everyone on this map. And I think that that was part of it. I think once they won a pistol round, it probably settled them down a bit, because then you kind of get a free second round. It's like, okay, we're in the lead. And then once they got to that point, they, mentally were in the right place. And then they just are very good at this map. And I must say for Team Heretics as well, they their defense side on Sunset. Again, I thought that this was a bit of a strange pick. Again, it felt like Team Heretics didn't fully respect what they should have done from what EDG had done prior. Like, Paper Rex are good at Sunset. So when
Hmm.
EDG are destroying them, maybe give them some respect on that map. And your Sunset defense side was horrible against Leviatan as well.
Yeah.
So they really, really struggled on that side against Lev and were lucky to scrape out 4 rounds with a pistol on their defense against Lev. And so this I thought was a strange first pick by them. Obviously, they have a double map veto against them as well, which isn't great. But EDG, yeah, we're just amazing. And the difference between map 1 and 2, there was like after Team Heretics took their first time out, it was like 4-0. They then called like an aggressive B main play where they like threw their nade, one-way smoke, Omen flash, all that. And EDG, a couple of their players were standing outside B main, and just instantly it's like instant. They knew like, okay, we're gonna do a mid A split straight away. KangKang's gonna sprint up there. We're gonna KO ult, and we're gonna do this full A split, and we're and like just perfectly executed it. Kill the 2 players who were on A straight away. And then the round's over 5v3, and we've already won. Like, and compare that to map 1 where they were so slow and
Yeah.
didn't know what to do at all. And I'm watching this, and it's like instant reaction, like instantly we know what to do.
Yep.
Like it was crazy. It was I don't understand how I don't understand how that happened, to be honest. Because I was really worried that, oh, okay, we're now going into Heretics' pick. Like, mentally EDG might be boomed already.
Yep.
This could be over, and it couldn't have been more different. And I have to say as well, respect to Heretics, because they could have easily been boomed after this as well.
Yeah.
That like, oh shit, we just got fucked on our own map.
Yeah.
Like, that's meant to be our best map. Oh shit. But now we come to Lotus, which, from this point on, it wasn't as much of a stomp. The thing is, though, obviously EDG playing this very strange comp, um, very strange, but they make it work, and I think it's strange enough to where it does confuse teams as to what they should do. Teams
Hmm.
don't seem to know how to react to EDG's comp,
Yep.
and even though it does have gaps, like they have no true Sentinel, it seems like there's enough kind of chaos in there. And teams play it maybe a bit too standard against them, where they think, oh hey, we are in a C post ban, it's fine. But against EDG's comp, like just being in a 5v5 post ban, like you might think you're fine, but actually you're maybe not so fine, right? There's some things that they're better at than perhaps the more standard comps are.
Hmm.
But what did you think of Lotus?
Um, yeah, I mean Lotus. So when I was working with Acend in stage 2, we also ran Clove on Lotus,
Hmm.
just because it was like comfort agent for one of our players. And so, I'm not as big a Clove hater as you are. I don't have a tracker for the amount of utility that's getting value. But yeah, I think this map is one of the things that like makes me really appreciate EDG this season, is just that they not only did they win champs by like really just kind of hitting this peak form at the right time with pretty much all of their players, but they also played like their own version of Valorant. Like it wasn't,
Yeah.
we must copy every comp. So yes, on Sunset obviously they ran a comp that other teams had run, but they adapted, because at the beginning of the year they were running like chamber stuff on this map, and
Yeah.
they figured out the roles. They figured out KangKang is a really good neon. Cool, let's do that. On Lotus, they're playing kind of pieces of the standard comp but with their own flavor. And then
Yeah.
on the next 2 maps they also are running kind of like their own sort of flavor of each different map. And so I like that they were uh able to kind of like figure out who they are as a team and then tailor the comps around that and their approach to the maps. And so like on a map like Lotus, obviously the biggest things that you have to know about is that a main choke point is like such a huge focal point,
Yeah.
and this comp basically can't lose that fight. Like
Yeah.
they basically have like maybe not the best, but pretty close to the best possible 5-man squad to fight for a rebel. So they're never going to
Yeah.
lose that fight if they want to. And then also the map is 3 sites. So like the map is constantly in a state of flux, right? Like if you dedicate a bunch of resources to fighting A or C, you then have to respread your map eventually. And so having 2 sets of dome smokes is very good for that. Having a neon who can sprint from one side of the map to the other, having a breach who can help through walls from like a middle point on the map and can go to both sides, having an Omen who can help through walls is also very good. And so they just have like all the tools to play this very kind of like fast and loose style without trolling. Um, and I think you're
Yeah.
right. It kind of does take a team that's trying to play a little bit more standard. You know, Heretics, I think they were on the Neon earlier this year, right? Weren't
Yeah.
they? And now they're
Yeah.
on the Rays. And I personally still like the Heretics comp better, but if you're playing kind of like the formulaic style, like everybody knows how to play against that, right? It's like, okay, well, they're not going to fight for Rubble because they can't fight us, so they're going to go C next, and they're going to go get the orb, and then they're going to come back and
Yeah.
re-clear B, and then they're going to come A, and then they're eventually going to split into B through vents or blue or broken door, whatever you want to call it. And if you understand like the play patterns of the real of like the default comp, and you're playing something opposite of that, then you can really start to exploit some of these timings, especially if you have the utility to do it. And so I think we kind of saw that. And also, just again, individually, the players were insane. Like KangKang
Yeah.
was insane. Chi was unbelievable on this map,
Hmm.
and they did enough to where like the clove was not a hindrance to them. It kind of like allows Smoggy to play duelist while also contributing utility to the team.
No, yeah, and I do think like the look, I'm a D1 Clove hater, as everyone knows, but uh like the way that EDG do it, as you say, like their A fight is so good, but then you've got Smoggy just doing one ways out towards C as well on the
Yep.
defense side, which kind of for the default comp is a bit of a problem because it means that you don't really want to go and fight A early, but then you're also going to have to commit your fade utility early
Yep.
to taking C, which is also not what you really want to do because then it makes it harder for you to reclear A if you wanted to go there later on in the round. So
Yep.
kind of just puts you in a bit of a problem there with the default comp. And I think Heretics experienced that. But as you say, to me, this map, like it was close. It just came down to a couple, like there was just a couple rounds where, and a couple moments that you can remember where EDG went fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Chichu with his ace goes fucking crazy.
This map was
Simon,
won on
the
individual play. It
yeah,
was
the
yeah.
1v2 Simon
Yeah.
killed your lockdown. Like, and absolutely, like, and he had such a rough game as well. Like, his support utility was still pretty good, but in terms of fragging was so, like, was weak. But then to do that in that moment and just like win you a crucial round was just like exactly what they needed at exactly that time. And EDG's attack side with this comp as well, is very difficult to beat, right? It's very difficult to beat this kind of attack side comp, which is what Team Heretics found out.
Is
We then moved to Bind. Oh, sorry.
sorry. Is it just me, or does Simon get massively underrated because his name is Simon? So he sounds like some like little tiny nerdy kid, like yeah, my name's Simon. It's like I don't know, for some reason every time, like obviously he's not like in the team for fragging power. Like everybody knows that they have plenty of fragging power.
Yeah.
But I feel like he gets so disrespected because his name is Simon. It's like you've got, yeah, KangKang, Smoggy,
So
nobody,
yeah,
Chi.
so
Simon?
yeah, so you think if his name was like Slayer or something,
Right.
people would be like,
Yeah.
people would be like, wow, what a player, what a guy.
Everybody's just
Um,
bullying Simon. Meanwhile, he's just like the perfect support player for the team.
yeah. Okay, let's move on to Bind, which is probably one of my favorite maps I've watched
Yeah, this map was
in
insane.
a long time. It was a very, very back and forth map, very, very close throughout the entire map, and the way it ended was insane as well. So Team Heretics end up coming out on top of this one, 13-11. Again, there's a cut. I mean, I was talking to you a bit about it before, but like one of the most iconic Valorant moments for me will be Chichu kicking away a Brim Molly and
Mm-hmm.
allowing EDG to defuse. Because again, obviously at this point we didn't know whether this could have been the last map of the entire season,
Yeah.
right? And Heretics are on 12 and they've got what, a 12-8 lead or something. But
Mm-hmm.
EDG start pulling it back and they get back to 11, including Chichu kicking away a Brim Molly
Yep.
and getting them back into it. And then the last round, round 24. And it always makes me laugh that you get into these super high pressure situations and you can almost guarantee every single team in that in that situation is just gonna say, let's like the call is just let's go A or let's go B.
Yeah,
Like, there's not much else to it, and that wasn't
yeah,
for Team Heretics either. It was just pretty much like, I guess let's just go A. And they did go A, and they end up winning on time. KangKang gets probably the saddest ace of all time as he's just staring at the spike with a Raze ult in hand.
yeah, yeah.
It was
And the brimstone
yeah.
molly is kind of what closes it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. The Brim Molly wins the day for Team Heretics.
Yep.
Um like this map was just so close. It just felt like every round was just like so crazy, like close all the time, and it was so tense throughout. It felt like, and I think we got a tech pause at one point as well
Mhm.
during this, which was just adding to it all as well. Yeah, this was one of my favorite maps of the entire year.
Yeah, I mean, mirror comp, Heretics win both pistols, so
Yeah,
that kind of gets them over the line as well. Um, and again, just another insane map from KangKang playing arrays. The craziest part is there's no jet. There's no like op agent here so far in this
yeah,
series, right? Um,
yeah,
and yeah, so just really showing that he's like a full well-rounded player. I mean, also this was Mini Boo's map. He was going nuts, like
yes,
silencing the haters, all the people who are like, oh, bring Patatek back, kick Mini Boo out. Like Mini Boo is like, no, I'm a tier one duelist, like, and I'm gonna show you
yeah,
guys. Um, but just like, yeah, I mean, this was probably the map of the tournament. Outside
mhm,
of like maybe some like the big overtime maps that we had earlier on, but certainly of the grand finals, this was definitely like um I think probably my favorite map as well. Just in terms
yeah,
of like the amount of like hero plays that were happening, but also just like good rounds from both teams.
yeah.
It was definitely a map where it's like you couldn't really tell who was going to win until it was over.
It just felt like every round was, you'd get into a 4v3 and then it'd be a 3v2 the other way, and then the team with two would win, like it,
Yep.
and not because of like major mistakes, more
Right.
so
Just
from
insane trading. Like
insane
both
play.
both
Yeah,
teams were playing like super shoulder to shoulder. It's like they're entering a site. There's three people on the site. The first player on defense gets one. Like then the trade happens. Then like the other people flood in, and it's just trade, 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 trade. Not really sure what happens. Like I'm gonna need to see the replay to actually understand
yeah,
like how everybody died all of a sudden. But yeah, it
yeah,
was it was really good.
yeah. That was a really good map. And then finally we came to Abyss. Um, and the thing here really for me on Abyss was this. Like, if you wanted to make the case for EDG winning this game before the match started, the
Hmm.
case for EDG was that they did have a map advantage.
Yeah.
Like that their maps, you could even argue the two maps that they banned in Ascent and Icebox. Like they banned Ascent, that's Team Heretics permaban. And they
Hmm.
banned it anyway because it's their ban essentially as well.
Hmm.
Right? They played Icebox against Lev and they almost beat Lev at Icebox.
Hmm.
You could have argued that EDG, and then even on Haven, right? You could argue that in a normal world, or maybe if Haven isn't map one and EDG, on completely shaking like a leaf and panicking, you could argue that essentially, I mean, and then on bind as well, like Team Heretics won both pistols. Like this is how EDG won. Similar to sort of Gen G. They didn't enter the tournament. This is the thing. They didn't enter champs with this map pool. But
Yeah.
by the end of champs, they had a map pool that was incredible.
Yeah.
That was just like incredibly solid throughout. And then they had Sunset and Lotus, which was two pretty much free wins
Hmm.
against almost anyone. So when you have a map pool that's that deep, and again, it's not like they're amazing at Abyss, but they were clearly better than Team Heretics were at Abyss throughout this entire tournament. Team Heretics, just didn't have a very good Abyss
Yeah.
throughout the entire time. And I think that that's ultimately what kind of showed up here. They had a slow start on the first half. Must be said, EDG won both pistols in this one. And I think that second pistol, where nobody is on his own and there's four people running at him, and he just destroys three of them as they're coming in, and he doesn't even die, and they win that pistol. That to me was, like the first stage of it being over. But then you got the tense moment of the Heretics comeback as well, all leading up to, as the saying goes, it's always an eco. And
Mhm.
KangKang, just going. And this is the thing, KangKang
Oh,
had
the
had a
Guardian
quiet
round.
map.
The Guardian round.
Yeah, up until that point, and this is, as you said, was the first time he was playing Jet.
Yep.
And he'd actually had a pretty mediocre map. Like, he
Mhm.
was, I think he was actually bottom fragging before that round for his team.
Yeah, I think
And
you're
just
correct.
goes,
I think you're
and
correct.
just goes crazy with a Guardian. And,
Just
pretty
an
much.
actual main character moment. He's
Yes.
like, don't
Like,
worry,
yes.
guys, I'm winning us this map.
Yeah. With just an incredible.
Because
uh,
remember, like, EDG, we came out and like straight up the first half, just it really looked like, okay, well, the map is kind of attack sided. EDG has been really good on attack. Heretics looking a little bit kind of slow, maybe in terms of their reactions. EDG comes out, they're 8-4. They win pistol. Now they're up a bunch. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Heretics has figured it out. Like, EDG can't stop them.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
is this really going to be a comeback? Are we really watching
Yeah.
that? EDG, wake up, hello, anybody? And then KangKang is like, everything's fine. I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he doesn't make that play, Heretics probably wins this map.
Yeah, like, because in the moment, like, it really did feel like, it was 11-4.
Yeah.
And Heretics had won 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And not many of them were close either. And
Yeah.
it really did look like, oh shit, the pressure is getting to them. They don't have this. It really felt like it was on. And and obviously going into that round, it's like, well, they're on an eco and they only have one Guardian and no one else has a rifle.
Yeah.
Like, so it's gonna be 11-10. And then it's like you are panicking at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really felt like this was maybe going to be, one of the greatest comebacks for Team Heretics,
Yeah.
and maybe one of the biggest throws for EDG. But luckily for them, and really, like, this is the thing, right? It felt like this was like they had all that experience of all those Chinese grand finals that they do this shit as well, where
Mm-hmm.
they aren't the better team in that moment or whatever, and they were starting to struggle here on Abyss, but someone just says they just got that plot armor and just say, like, it's fine, guys. Someone's gonna fucking get a 4K here randomly at some point, and it's gonna win us a game. And that's exactly what happened here. And I do, and to me, like, across the entire series as well, I think that was a bit of a difference across the entire series. That when I think of so many of the moments and the 4Ks and like the crucial clutches and stuff like that, and maybe it's because EDG won, but I do think this is true. Like, thinking about it across the series, so many of them are done by EDG, right? The Benji had a couple, like, really nice 3Ks. I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe a 4K in there. I don't really remember Woot doing it that much. I don't really
Yeah.
remember Rien's doing it that much. Minibu had a very good bind, as you said, but across the maps, it was more kind of like he'd have like solid rounds, like a bunch of solid rounds, not like
Honestly,
maybe he had one or
Boo
two.
was probably having the most clutch moments in this series.
Yes,
Yeah.
it probably was Boo, which again, it just felt like a bit of a difference when, like, pretty much fucking anyone, and especially Chichu, Smoggy, and KangKang on EDG. Just at any point, you're just like, oh shit, here we go,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh, there's a 4K or a 3K, like random 3K. It's like, oh shit, round over. I did feel like that was a bit of a difference.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I think one thing that's really kind of interesting to think about is, how like Demon won last year at Champs?
yeah,
Everybody was like, oh, this guy's like so cocky, right? Like he's just such a like ego player, right?
hmm
Do you prefer ego players or humble players? And Demon One's just out there like, oh, he's just like standing in the open, like, come swing into me and I will kill you.
yeah,
And KangKang also has like that same type of aura, not to use like Zoomer slang, but like he literally has that aura where it's just like there are certain people that are actually, and this is again not to use Zoomer slang, that are actually built different. And when the high pressure moments come, they are so happy to be in them. And KangKang is just one of those people, and you can just tell, like, from his his post game interviews, the way that he stands up on stage when he's like hyping himself up, like he's actually totally in his element when the pressure is the highest. And same type of thing as Demon One. Like, he was literally in these insane moments. Again, as a fucking rookie last year, with like less than a full season under his belt in tier 1. And it's just like the moment is there, and you're just like, he's gonna kill 3 people here. Like, there is zero chance that he loses any of these duels. And you just have the same kind of perception of KangKang. So yeah, I'll be curious to see whether the community turns on KangKang eventually, as they did it with Demon One. Like,
I don't think so. I don't think so. I
But yeah,
don't think so.
you have to respect it. Like, there are certain people that are big game players in sports And there's certain players in Valorant that are big game players, and it's just when the pressure is the highest, these players step up. It's like, Michael Jordan in basketball. Like, you give him the last
Yeah.
shot at the end of the game. You don't give it to LeBron James. You give it to Michael Jordan.
Wow, some haters there. Okay, I think we've glazed EDG enough. I think we've given them enough time in the sun, as they deserve it.
Yeah.
As I said, I still feel like we need to, as a community, like really digest what actually happened, because
Right.
like I do my little sheet where people can buy teams on the sheet,
Yep.
and EDG were the 13th team out of 16
Yeah.
that were bought on that sheet, because that's what people thought of them coming into this tournament. Most people didn't even have them getting out of the group stage, and they
Yeah.
ended up going through the uppers.
I think
And
I had
again,
them in C or B tier, something like that, when I did a pre-tournament power ranking,
yep,
something like
when
that.
you go through the uppers, it's not a fluke. You
Yep.
just and again, to anyone who does genuinely still think that this is a fluke, I just want to remind you that EDG ended up being second place, third place, and fourth place
Yep.
in their run through the uppers.
Yeah.
So if you still think it's a fluke, just consider that and think, who else was there to beat?
They didn't beat FNATIC, and FNATIC were the best team.
FNATIC were okay on Haven.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Let's talk about some of these other teams though. Let's start with Team Heretics. Who the narrative, I think, is obviously the very clear narrative for Team Heretics. And they will probably already have started to take on, they're shaking hands with Paper Rex as the chokers, the team that
No,
just can't.
no, no,
You
no,
don't think so? You
no.
don't think that's already started? I think that's already
Well,
started,
I mean,
personally.
from the community, perhaps, but
Yes.
that's not true. Like, this is
Oh
not
no, I
this
don't
is
think.
not a choking team. This is completely different than Paper X. Um,
Is it completely different?
yes, it's completely different than Paper
Tell me
X,
why it's completely different. I
because
agree that it's different. I don't think it's completely different.
Heretics does not play in the same style as Paper X. Paper X loses because they have one method of play. There is no second option for Paper X. It's just like, we're going here. We're going to let you know that we're executing here. If you can stop or execute, you're like, well played. Heretics actually plays the game. Like, and this is gonna sound like me flaming Paper X, but like, Heretics plays, real real Valorant. Heretics, they're just like a genuinely good team that does a lot of good things, that like plays, a variety of different styles of rounds. They are a little bit reliant on hero plays to win them rounds at times, but I think that they are a much more complete team in terms of like being able to fight against different styles, adapt to the tournament as it's going on, than Paper X. And also Heretics has done an unbelievable job leveling up throughout the course of the year. Remember, they played 2 of their events with not the full roster. This is a team that has had to make multiple roster moves. Yes, it's just the same player coming in and out multiple times, but they've had to make multiple roster moves throughout the course of the season. They've had to deal with the fact that like their entire team is rookies, basically. The fact that they went from where they were at the beginning of the year, I mean, where they were last year, obviously completely different team, but I don't see the comparison to Paper X. So why do you think that they're closer than I'm giving them credit for?
Well, to me, what you just said makes them sound more like chokers than Paper Rex,
Why?
if you want to use the word chokers. Because to me, what you've just laid out is that Paper Rex probably just came up against someone who could counter their style in the grand finals, which is,
Well,
I think,
I don't really think Paper X are
I think,
chokers either. I think this whole narrative of
okay.
chokers is not true.
No, yeah, I'm not against you with that either. Um, but I think when you look at Team Heretics here, I think thing is for them, I think both times the part that's different for them to Paper Rex is that both times the Paper Rex were in a grand final, they had the map veto advantage and they came from the uppers,
Mm-hmm.
and so they had all the maps they wanted. The difference is both times for Team Heretics, and I did think that this kind of came up in this grand final. Although again, I think that EDG, even with the maps that they banned, arguably are better than Team Heretics on those maps as well. But I do think that especially against Gen G, it's very tough to beat Gen G in Shanghai when you're coming with no, 2 map vetoes against you, right? Like
Yeah.
I understand that that was always going to be pretty tough for them. So that's the kind of different aspect of it. But I still think that when you look at Team Heretics in this grand final, as I kind of said, like on an individual level, I think in many moments those like we said, like Boo is the guy who had maybe the most clutch moments. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem, and I think like you've lost 4 grand finals in a row. And look, I get what you mean. Like the whole choking narrative is unfair because you're looking at very small sample sizes, and so sometimes you're also playing as very good teams. So it's like,
Yeah.
and you're also losing 3-2. So it's not like a disaster either. It's not like choking would have been like if EDG played how they did the first map for 3 maps in a row and got stomped. That's choking.
Yeah.
That's like you literally didn't turn up. That's what choking is. So yeah,
Yes.
they aren't chokers, but I do think that this question will loom over them, whether they wanted to or not. Even in their own heads, I think the question will loom over them of whether they can win a tournament because they've experienced a loss twice. And every other team, other than them and Paper Rex, Josh said this during the cast, every other team that's been in a grand finals, other than them and Paper Rex, have won a grand finals now.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of stuck there as like, are you the team that just can't quite do it? And again, I still think looking long term, if we're looking into next season, assuming Team Heretics stay together with this 5, which I hope they do, assuming that is the case, they should, considering most other teams are probably going to make some kind of roster moves or whatever, they should be, particularly early on in the season, the favorites or one of the favorites to win any tournament. Of course they will, because they're really good.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a surprise. So, like long term, I think they'll be fine. But maybe we would have said the same about Paper Rex coming off last champs as well last year. That they'll be fine. Although I think, as you say, it's probably more volatile for Paper Rex because of their style than it will be for Team Heretics.
Yeah. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think that the narrative maybe has more legs to it if they had the same 5 throughout the entire
Yeah,
season.
that's fair.
But the fact that they were having to kind of like constantly shift their roster around, redo their roles again and again, it might
Yeah,
not seem like a big deal because it's just like the one player, and obviously Patek was great, and Woot was playing duelist, but then he's playing initiator. Like it's not that big of a change necessarily, but trust me, it is. it's
yeah,
it's a big difference anytime you swap even one player, in terms of how
yeah,
the team functions. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think realistically speaking, they probably kind of end up in that maybe FNATIC going from 2022 to 2023 spot.
mm,
FNATIC, they kept the same team essentially going from 2022 to 2023. They came into lockdown and they were just by far the best team because they had stuck together and they were already like the best player in each role for the team, and they had time to work on their strats and synergy and all that, and they came in and they were just insane. So yeah, I'm not saying that Heretics is going to win 2 events next year, but I think they will get their win next year as long as something like major doesn't happen to break up the team.
okay,
Because like for me, I think this is a team that they come into a grand final, and I wouldn't say that they've ever been like particularly heavy favorites. I think they're maybe in
no,
that like 50-50, maybe 55-45, maybe 45-55, depending what side you put them on in all of these matches, except for maybe like the
yeah,
Vitality one, I guess, where they lost, but it's whatever. It's regional finals. Doesn't really matter that much. If we're talking about just in the lands, like the international lands, I wouldn't have favored them over Gen G. And so it's like if they have like a 40% chance to beat Gen G, like that's a lot of the time that they're going to lose. If they have a
yeah,
55% chance that they're going to beat EDG in this one, 45% is still a very large percentage chance that they're going to lose.
yeah. But I think that that's the argument against them potentially winning any future tournaments as well, of course, is when you get to a grand final, the likelihood is you're not going to have more than a 55, percent chance in most grand finals because the other team that you're playing is probably also going to be pretty good, right? There's
Yeah.
not going to
So
be a
so then like
free
flipping a
grand
coin,
final.
you can get heads like 5 times in a row. It's not that big of a
Yeah,
deal. Like it
yeah,
doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you're chokers even. It just means that like it's a good matchup, and you're gonna lose like a very large percentage of that time, like in the grand scheme of things. So
Yeah.
it is what
No,
it
I
is.
agree with you. I agree with you. I think the problem is more that they will start to think it.
Yeah.
Even though I agree with you that it's not true, I think it's just human nature that people on the outside, as we think wrongly, are gonna call them, chokers, or they're
Yeah.
gonna say you can't do it, and they might start to internalize that and think, "Oh, can we do it?" And then that will impact your performance. That's
Yeah,
the only thing I think
certainly. If we start to
could
see
hold
that
it
same
back.
trajectory as Paper X, where it's like, oh, okay, you can actively see them playing worse in the finals.
Yeah,
Because that's what Paper X is starting to do. Is like in the big games, they are actively playing worse. And so if Heretics
yeah.
starts doing that next year, then they have problems. But yeah.
Okay, let's move on then to Leviatan, third place. And I'm gonna say to you, Leviatan, this is a weird one because third place you'd think is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But if I told the team Leviatan, hey, you're gonna play EDG in the upper final,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna think we should win the whole thing. I think when they're in that position, they would probably be thinking, especially when I sell you, oh, on map 3, you're gonna win both pistols as well.
Mm-hmm.
They'll definitely be thinking, we're gonna win. Oh, you're gonna win both pistols, and you're gonna be up 11, whatever it was, 8. They're definitely gonna think we're gonna go to the grand final and we're gonna win.
Yep.
And they didn't. So my question is, was this tournament a success or not for Leviathan?
Um, I mean, obviously they're not gonna think so. Like anytime you have two former literal,
World champs, yeah.
Valorant world champions, like getting third place is gonna be unacceptable to those players for sure. I think honestly, it's so funny how things come full circle. To me, the narrative that we had early on about Lev being like 1 inch away from implosion
Yeah.
all year round.
Yeah.
I feel like this is just like the next evolution of that, because all year, even when they were, stomping in Americas, and then they came into this tournament and like they were kind of maybe a favorite, but maybe not. It's always that like, are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? I don't know. Like genuinely, this team has like the highest peaks and lowest troughs in terms of like the difference in what level they can show up on map to map than I think any other team at this tournament. And I really just feel like this team was always just like one moment away from losing a map, but also could potentially just win that map. And it was very hard to figure out like what lev we were going to get from moment to moment. And not that this team is like going to implode and break up. Maybe they will. I don't know. But um it's just kind of like at the beginning of the season, it was like, are they gonna, have to make roster moves? And now it's just like, I don't know if they're gonna win this map. Like against any team, it's like, is the good Lev gonna show up? Is the bad Lev gonna show up? And it's, I think, partially a play style thing. Like not to put a ton of hate on Tex, because he's obviously like an easy punching bag on this team. I feel like, because at the beginning of the year, the traffic cone narrative, like this guy, does this guy belong on a super team? In my opinion, I think over the course of this season, especially in this tournament, I think Tex really showed like he is an insane player. Like he's really really good.
Yeah.
He's insanely good at finding lurk timings. He's really really good at kind of like doing like the Benji Fishy role. Really turning around by finding like the perfect moment to get a 3K, that type of stuff. But because of his play style, I mean, he took almost the same amount of first duels as Ospas, and he lost a lot of them. Like he went 5-13 in this map against EDG. 13 deaths from your anchor player is a lot of deaths from your anchor player. That's a lot of free sites potentially. And so I think it's just kind of how he plays his role that is a little bit high risk, high reward, and that just kind of leans into, it's not that it's bad, it's just how he plays the role. And it's potentially just one of those things where like in some moments that's going to win them a lot of rounds, a lot of maps, but in sometimes it's going to lose the maps. And it's not, again, not just Tex, but I think Lev's playstyle in general, a lot of it is kind of like I don't know, I feel like their style is it's kind of an interesting one where like they're they're enabling Ospas by kind of sacrificing some of their other players, and then it kind of puts some of their other players on an island where they have to like either make a hero play or make like a crucial decision, and if they make the wrong one, then they lose the round. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I thought Mazzino played great. I thought Tex played great. I thought Com played great. I thought King played great. I thought Ospas played great. but sometimes they just like make the wrong choice and it loses them the game. And yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about Lev?
Yeah, they're a weird team, aren't they? To
Yeah.
talk about, because I mean, I was just looking at it again. If you look at the lower final as well, Tex took more first duels than Aspas did across the entire lower final as well. He actually was +3 in that game, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's still taking more than Aspas, which is kind of crazy. To me, the thing that probably cost Lev in a way is that they came into the tournament and they were banning Lotus, which I was like, oh, that's good, because there's actually quite a lot of good Lotus teams at this
Yeah.
tournament. So I thought that was an advantage for them. But then halfway through, they started banning Bind instead, and they started playing
Mm,
Lotus. And one, Bind just isn't nearly as good of a ban at this tournament because there wasn't as many good Bind teams, so they kind of lost that advantage. And then two, when it actually came, push came to shove, their Lotus wasn't that great.
mm-hmm.
In their last two games, they lost 13-4, 13-3 on
Yeah.
Lotus in the against EDG and Heretics. So
Couldn't play defense. I think their Lotus comp, I do remember
yeah,
this. I think their Lotus comp is terrible. I will say that, no offense to the coaches, no offense to the team. I think their Lotus comp is absolutely terrible. It doesn't make any sense in terms of how it's built. And I think if you're in like, a top 4, you can't have like a literally bad comp. Like
mm,
like as much as you want to like flame the Clove comp from EDG, at least like the comp makes sense in terms of like the how like the
yeah.
agents
I
function together.
praise the Clove. Don't go. I praise the way that they played it. Don't you get on me now?
This comp from Lev actually doesn't make sense. Like the agents do not work together very well, and especially on the map, they don't work. So I think they
Oh, there
actually
you go.
actively have a bad comp. They're playing from a deficit on Lotus all the time because their comp is trash.
Well, there you go. And yeah, I think that was kind of tough for Lev, and I don't know. It kind of felt like they ran out of steam a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In these last couple of games, it felt like like as I said on Abyss, like if you want to be world champs, like you got to close out when you're 11-8 up on map 3. Like you got to not lose 5 rounds in a row for sure. Like that's kind of unacceptable. And I remember in that Abyss attack as well. Oh my god, they were doing what the fuck were they doing? So on their attack side Abyss, upper final games on the line. You're up 11-8. All of a sudden, what started happening was Aspas got an op, and he would just stand in mid with the op for the
Mm-hmm.
entire round. The rest of the team, for some reason, thought, let's keep doing A execs without our duelist,
Mm-hmm.
and kept getting absolutely fucking stomped. And I just remember thinking, like, guys, if you want to do an exec without a duelist because he's lurking in mid with an op for some reason, there's a whole other site that is way easier to take
Yeah.
than this A site. And they just kept hitting A and kept losing over and over again. And I was just like, you guys fucking deserve to lose, because either don't give him an op. Give
Yeah.
Tex an op if you want. He can op in mid if you really,
Yeah.
really want an op.
Yeah. The whole like contacting mid with an op, trying to go in through like the weird corridors into B split too I was like, this is like a terrible angle for like, I don't know why this is such a big part of their attack right now. Is there like he was
Yeah.
contacting middle with an outlaw or an op, and like you're trying to like you're trying to clear like the B link with your op, but then also there's like the horseshoe at the top of mid that you have to worry about, and it's just like a solo jet trying to like somehow clear like a
Yes.
five
All of it. Yeah.
ankle spot with an
Yeah.
operator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whilst Levin, their normal just mid attack was
Yeah.
very good with the Harbor Omen. Like,
Yeah.
when they just normally went mid with the team, like it was good.
Yeah.
But yeah, strange. One final question on Lev.
Sure.
Does this team stick together?
I'm gonna say no. I don't
Okay.
think that they will. I think they'll keep some of the players, but I think they'll definitely make like maybe 1 to 2 roster moves. Um,
Okay.
I
Interesting.
I just feel like it's one of those things where they had a little bit too much sort of like, oh, it's a super team. Yeah, let's go super team vibes. And then they didn't accomplish things where
Yeah.
either like
Stuff.
management will want to make a move, or some of the players will have kind of lost faith a little bit potentially in some of their teammates. You know,
Yeah.
I think that they could stick together and be really good next year, but also it's more of a like a team vibes type of thing. Will they actually like believe in the project? And I for some reason I just don't think that they will.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to have that both external and internal expectation put on you
Yeah.
when you've never won anything
Yeah.
as a team, and more than half of your players have never won anything. Like
Yeah,
that is
and I mean,
that's tough.
shout out to all the players on this team. Like, Khan was getting a ton of shit. I think he was like one of their best players at this tournament. He looked really good. Mazzino had an insane year. He was really good all year. Obviously, Ospas is Ospas. Tex, like I said, leveled up a lot. And I think King's calling was the best it's ever been. I think his
Yeah,
calling was quite good this year. Because I've been a pretty big King IGL hater because everybody was like, oh, he's so good. I thought he overcooked a lot of rounds in previous years, but I thought
yeah,
his calling was a lot better this year. Um, and also shout out to Itapata, like stepping in partway through the season and really kind of
yeah,
turning this team's season around. I feel like when he came into the
yeah,
coaching role, they really kind of leveled up. So yeah, I
yeah.
mean, do they need to make changes? Not in my opinion, but will they? I think so.
Okay, let's move on to everyone's favorite team, Sentinels.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say
Um,
Trace Esports.
no, we're gonna go backwards. We're gonna
Okay.
go Sentinels. Um, this was a well, man, let's have this as the first question. Did Sentinels overachieve?
At this event.
Yeah.
Um,
Did they hit par? Did they underachieve? Should they have done better?
it's a really interesting question because I think, like community expectations for Sentinels coming into this were quite low, and they were definitely low for me. But after I
Yep.
watched them play like 2 games in the group stage, I was like, oh, this is just like Sentinels from Madrid, except maybe not quite as sharp. They
Yes.
don't have like that one map that wins them a series
Yeah,
every single time.
that was probably the difference. Yeah.
But I think they were basically back to like Madrid level in terms of their individual form. But
Mm,
unfortunately, the game has moved past that. We've
yeah.
gotten a little bit better over the course of the season. So Madrid level is not good enough. But yeah, going into the playoffs, I was like, I could see Sentinels winning this tournament. Like I think they're playing quite well. Um, so yeah, I guess like coming into the tournament, the expectations were kind of low, but you know, we always knew that they could be a good team because they'd already won a Masters tournament, and then they just kind of
Yeah.
like refound that form, and unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough. But like, I think if you run back this bracket, 100 times, Sentinels wins like a not insignificant amount of times.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I think the difference was the map pool that
Yeah.
they had Lotus, which they were good at.
Yep.
Um, but it felt like other than that, like they were having to kind of scrape and claw,
Hmm.
or hope that another team was not very good at a map that they were getting, right? Because
Dude, Tens is such a good player. Like he really is. Not to like be like a bat chest 10 stand, but like he's really fucking good in high pressure games. Like he's really really good. He made a lot of incredible plays to kind of like keep them in some of these maps towards the end. Um, but yeah,
yeah, I think tens. From my memory, maybe this is wrong, but my memory was in the group stage, tens was kind of like okay, but not spectacular. But it felt like he got better kind of as it went on,
mhm.
and kind of yeah, just improved. Interesting one for Sen though. I've maybe this is wrong again. I'm off the grapevine, so maybe you can tell me more. I've heard rumblings of Sacy retirement rumors. Have you heard anything about this?
I mean, hasn't that happened the last like 3 years? Wasn't like Saucy might
Wow.
retire after Loud, Saucy might retire after last year, since Saucy might. I don't know. I feel like
Okay,
he
so
mentioned it in an
maybe.
interview like 2 years ago, and now people bring it up every single time that the offseason
Okay, so
happens.
Sassy might retire, but assuming Sassy does not retire, again, I'll ask you the same question: do Sen stick together?
I do think that they will potentially make a change
Oh,
for Saucy. I do
even
think
if he doesn't retire.
I do think that's possible. So I think possibly the where you're hearing this rumor from is he tweeted afterwards that he's going home and gonna think about his future. I think it's kind of like the standard, end of season
Okay,
tweet. I don't know what his contract is. I think maybe it is up after this year, potentially. I don't actually know. I haven't looked at like the database, but I mean, realistically, they're gonna let Tens play on the team until he doesn't want to play, right? Unless
yep,
they run out of money or something like that. But he is kind of a big source of them having money, probably, in part. So Tens is playing here for as long as he wants to. I assume Zekin is probably in the same boat.
Yep.
John Cutie, I don't think is going anywhere. I mean, who else are you going to find IGL in North America that's like at a good level to like, you know, continue developing and becoming even better? And then Zelsis, I guess Zelsis is like maybe one other area because obviously he had kind of a bad final match. He was like pretty broken up about how poorly he played, I think, in like the post game press conference. But also I think he's been like such an insanely good ambassador for the team. Like that kind of buys him a little bit of runway as far as like
Yeah.
staying with the team. And he's been such like a good teammate, like selfless player. But I guess maybe there's some potential where it's like, oh well, maybe, you know, they approach him like, hey, do you want to like kind of be 6-man again? Like we got a chance to bring up, I don't know, like a insert, you know, tier 2
Yeah.
insane cracked player potentially. Now that, you know, Tens has more experience, John Cutie has more experience, maybe they don't need like the veteran leadership, quote unquote, from Sacy and Zelsis. So maybe they look to kind of like go young, I guess, and get
Hmm.
more talent. But I don't know. Like I think that you could run this team back potentially, and still have pretty good results next year. I think that maybe one area that is a little concerning is their weird fascination with the tier 2 NA comps that they seem to like why did that happen? Like they actively made some of their maps worse by trying to like play some stuff
Yeah.
that works against bad teams in tier 2 North America,
Yeah.
you know?
And if you're gonna bring out a tier 2 North American comp, particularly on Lotus, at least go the full fucking distance with the M80 comp and play Deadlock Sage
Yeah.
Cypher
Yeah.
on a map. At least if you're gonna do it, fucking jump in, you know?
Yeah. So
Don't just play Deadlock, fucking go crazy like
yeah,
M80 have.
I'm a little worried about some of their comp choices and their maybe like lack of flexibility of like kind of shifting how they play over the course of the season.
But
Maybe being,
Split's coming back in the map pool.
is it really?
You don't know about this?
I've
They already
forgotten.
announced this.
I've forgotten.
Yeah, Split and Pearl are coming back, and
Okay.
Icebox and Lotus are going. Oh, Lotus is going. That's bad for them. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Sen,
that's right.
I mean, yeah. What is this? I would say from the start of the tournament, this is an overperformance.
Yes.
Most people didn't even have them coming out of the group. You have to remember they beat Gen G, right? So
Yeah.
finishing fourth, overperform. I mean, considering what we saw like the last time in NA, what we saw from Sentinels, like
Yeah.
this was a big improvement, and they refound that spark. However, they did it.
Beating FNATIC is a good win. Like it's a very
Yeah, they
solid
beat
win.
Gen G. That's a good win.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had two very good wins at the very least. Let's move on to DRX,
Hmm.
the last Pacific team that was standing, and this one I think is quite. To me, this is an overachievement from DRX, or
Yeah.
is it? Is it though?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Because here's what I'm going to say to you: DRX in the group stage, their group, they were okay. They beat Fnatic. Fair enough. They finished first in their group, but it's
Hmm.
not a shock that they came through the group stage.
Yeah.
And then in the playoffs, they lost 2-0 to Sen, and they beat Trace,
Hmm.
and then they lost
And they lost to Heretics, who's
Heretics.
clearly a better team than them. Yeah.
So is it that crazy that they did this? Is it an overachievement, or did they just do what was like when you look at their bracket that they got? Did they just do what was kind of the obvious?
I think it's an overachievement because they very easily
Okay.
could have lost a crew. Like crew has
Okay.
a lot more experience on stage than this team does. Remember, DRX is like one.
Yeah.
They have
No.
like two experienced players now, right? It's Mako and Buzz are the oldest players on the team, which is crazy. Or not maybe the oldest, but the most experienced players on the team. Um, I I mean, I think that like if you look at like their level of play, maybe this is like exactly where they should have finished.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree with that.
but as far as like that the team and their experience, you know, they they lost to a more experienced team in Sentinels in the upper finals, and I think it was very clearly like, oh, this team is kind of choking under the pressure on stage. Like DRX played
Hmm.
significantly worse in playoffs than they did in the
Yes.
group stage. Sentinels
Yeah.
played significantly better, and then they lost to Heretics, who are just a better team. There's no shame in losing to a better team, in
Yeah.
my opinion. So yeah, I mean they beat Trace, who is definitely the weakest team in the bracket, and then they lost to the team that made the grand finals and almost won the tournament. So It is what it
Yeah.
is. I think I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to watch this DRX team. I feel like they're very very much in that spot where next year they're probably gonna be one of these teams. It's like they're near the top of Pacific, if not winning it, and they're gonna go to international tournaments and they'll probably finish fourth maximum because I don't I don't see this team winning a tournament ever. But maybe that's just me being a DRX hater. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I was just giving you a bit of a counter narrative there, but
Yeah,
I agree that the overall vibes I think coming out of this tournament will be pretty good. As you
yeah,
say, this was the first tournament for a majority of these players, and finishing fifth, sixth is on par with what a lot of the old teams did.
yep,
So there's no great shame in that. And the thing is, as you say, if this team sticks together and they continue to develop and get better, the only thing is, again, like next year, people are going to be saying, like, okay, like once we start getting to like champs next year, people are going to be like, oh, if this team is still together, okay, now you do have experience. You
yeah,
have been here for a bit of time now. Go and actually, make a grand final, go and
yeah,
actually do something. That's when it'll be interesting to see what happens to DRX. But yeah, I think as a first tournament, this was pretty decent overall. Speaking of teams with experience, though, who maybe did have higher ambitions, so what FNATIC?
yeah,
Because FNATIC, whilst fifth, sixth for DRX, giving their context was pretty good. For FNATIC, less good.
yeah,
Um, and how their bracket went, they lost 2-0 to Team Heretics. Okay,
yep.
maybe that's excusable.
Regional
Um,
rival and
yeah,
yeah,
know each other,
yep.
whatever, cool. Lost, oh, sorry, beat G2 2-0, so that's good. We're on the back on the good track.
And they kind of
And then you,
slapped G2 around too.
yeah,
Like
they
it,
really
it,
did
it
slap
wasn't
them.
really a close series.
Yeah. But then you lose to Sen, which I think probably going into that game, I would say probably most people thought that Fnatic were probably slight favorites going into that game. Um,
Yeah, I suppose slightly.
Going
Yeah,
into it, obviously,
yep,
yeah, we know I'm not yet not heavy favorites, but maybe slight favorites for Fnatic there, especially after they had stomped G2. And so then you lose. Now, this game, Sunset, to me, I mean, again, you're up 8-4. Felt very winnable for Fnatic map one.
hmm
They end up losing 13-11. They then win map two bind. They look like the better team. And then they get stomped on Lotus. And this is what was strange for Fnatic is that their Lotus seemed so up and down this year.
yeah,
That like at different times they were either like shit on it and it felt like they had no idea what they were doing. And I think that a lot of it came down to Fnatic became kind of obsessed with this idea. They were kind of the ones who perhaps did this most of this Odin and tree idea,
hmm
which sometimes is a very good idea and wins you a lot of rounds. But other times, and I think if teams were smart when they played against Fnatic, all it would mean is you're just giving up A control and you're just playing with no control across the map,
yeah,
right? And you're just hoping you get an Odin spam kill. And if you don't, you just don't know where they're going. You don't know where to rotate, and everyone's just frozen in place, and you're just hoping that someone can hold the site. And Sentinels in this game said to Fnatic, "You can't fucking hold this site," and they couldn't. And Sen won pretty convincingly, it must be said, on map three. So obviously, Fnatic were playing with a sub,
yep,
sort of. I
yeah.
mean,
I
yes,
mean,
but
let's call it what it is. Like, remember,
it was a sub.
Leo was the best player in the world potentially.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
I think that narrative is still real. Like he's that good of a player. And
yeah,
we know that he was kind of like a secondary voice for the team as well. I don't think that Hero was a secondary voice for this team. Um,
yeah,
and it also made them kind of shuffle their roles around a little bit, right? I mean, Hero played
yeah,
Initiator sometime, but also played Sentinel sometime. Maybe that freed up Alfear a bit. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. I think maybe having Leo's discipline maybe helped this team a little bit because I think that Alpha
yeah.
was particularly undisciplined in this tournament. And over the course of the
Mm,
season, I think he was more undisciplined than he was in previous years. And I think that's kind of a problem for Fnatic. When
yeah,
Alpha and Durka are overswinging stuff, they lose maps. Um, Durka kind of had a resurgence of form this season. I think
yeah,
he played significantly better. But in my opinion, Alpha played much worse this year than he had in previous years in terms of just like his decision making. Like he's still an insane player. His aim is really, really good. He makes a lot of good plays, but he also makes a lot of really dumb plays. And I think having Leo maybe tempered that a little bit because Leo is just like the safest player, right?
yeah,
He's the player that finishes every tournament with the least amount of first deaths, has like the best kill death ratio. He's always making sure that you have like this backline that's not going to throw you a game. And Hero played incredibly well considering the circumstances, but I think that in a in a champions playoffs, I think you're going to take Leo over Hero 100% of the time.
Yeah, I also think, like, for me, Boaster's performance seemed to suffer here as well.
Again, I
I
think
think
that's
Boaster,
Leo not being there. I think,
yes, I
yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
I think that Boaster, and this definitely happened, probably one of the worst tournaments you'll ever see by any player was Masters Reykjavik when they had two subs, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was completely reasonable when that happened, but I think Boaster sometimes goes into full micromanager role
Yes, yes,
and tries to like tell everyone like you need to put this bit of utility here and now
yep,
you need to run away, and he just stops focusing on himself whatsoever, and so he
yep.
just never wins a gunfight, and then you're playing 4v5 and it's just not working.
And
Whereas
and
when things are
Lotus is a
going well
map
for
where you
Fnatic,
have to do a lot of like it's a
yeah,
very macro intensive map most of the time, especially how Fnatic plays it. And so I think,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I think that was a bit of a problem for them this tournament, as
yeah,
maybe they weren't as free in general, maybe because of the Leo thing. My question now for Fnatic though is, assuming that they just bring back Leo and keep everyone else, will this team win? Would you favor this team to win another title?
yeah. I don't see why you wouldn't.
Okay,
I mean, they won 2 tournaments last year.
okay,
I don't know. I feel like yes, this year was like a little bit of an anomaly, but they also had a lot of like internal stuff happening with Leo's health problems and um I don't know. Like I think
but don't you think there's a lot more competition now?
there is for sure. Um I think this might be a bit of a hot take, but I
Mhm.
think that Alfear needs to evolve as a player. Um I think that he really needs to evolve as a player. I think that Durka also maybe needs to evolve as a player a little bit. The Yoru ISO stuff on Haven is the best that they've looked all year.
Yeah,
And part of that is because they give them a little bit more leash to make individual plays. They also run a little bit more of like a little bit more of like a kind of. I've been watching a lot of this because I've just been kind of
yeah, the
studying their
100
Haven,
Thieves.
and they do kind of like this interesting sort of like duo, like little skirmish style thing where like they pair up the Omen and the Sova with a duelist each, and then those players kind of individually function as Boaster like micromanages the rest of the round, and it allows them to kind of like Durka plus Chronicle makes a play here, and Alpha plus Boaster makes a play here, and then that gives them a lot of options on the map to like do different things, which is what Fnatic likes to do. Is they like to really kind of, you know, they're gonna hit the site, but they're not gonna hit the site until they've also pump faked another site and showed presence elsewhere. So it's never a straightforward round from Fnatic, and with the double duelist sort of like micro skirmish duos, it's a lot of random buzzwords, but they do this kind of like it gives them all these options, whereas Lotus and let's talk about Abyss, because Abyss was, there was the narrative like, oh, what's Fnatic gonna pull out on Abyss? They brought back Anders, he's got
Mm,
like the playbook on Abyss, they've got like the perfect comp potentially, and then you watch them play Abyss and it's just like they're literally reading from a script. And like we saw a little bit of that on their Lotus as well. They're reading from a script. Step 1 we do this, step 2 we do this, step 3 we do this. On Haven,
yeah,
the script is kind of like thrown out the window because they're playing a much more kind of like free. And I think
yeah,
when Fnatic is playing and embracing that freeness, it kind of allows Alpha and Durka to play a little bit more who they are as players, as opposed to just being like, I must do this, throw this utility, stand here, look in this direction, that type of thing.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, I think they're like, bring back Leo. I mean, again, we don't know what's going on with Leo. Hopefully he is better for next year. Um, and if he is unfortunately forced to sit out longer, I do think they found a really good talent in Hero with more time. If they just want to sign Hero or find somebody else, I think this team will be great. I feel like as long as they have the structure of Boaster plus Mini plus Coach Elma Buddy, I think Elma Buddy did a pretty good job this year. Um, I think they'll be good. People were asking me in my chat yesterday whether they need to get rid of Boaster, and I think that's dumb. I think, I think,
Mm.
I think.
Here's my boaster hot take though.
Sure.
I think he should learn Sentinel. I think he should learn Sentinel because I think it's going to be easier for him and the way he likes to play and think about the game.
Yeah.
If he can just sit on the back site, chill,
Yeah.
look at the map, stare at the map,
Yeah.
just not do anything. Tell other people to do stuff whilst he's just chilling.
He's already lurking
then,
on Astra. Yeah, he's already
yeah.
anchoring on it. Yeah, I actually like that a lot. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and Alpha's already been playing, initiators and stuff as well. So you just need someone to. I mean, Chronicle can play everything, so I'm sure just put Chronicle on smokes. I'm sure Chronicle can make it work because he can make every agent work. Alpha's playing some initiator and go from there.
Random tangent. Random tangent. This is gonna be a long episode, by the way. It's probably gonna be like 2.5 hours long. But random tangent. I was having this thought watching the last few series in the playoffs that I think Omen. It for a long time it was like if you're a good Jet player or if you're a good Raze player, like you're obviously insanely good at the game. I think that Omen might be like the litmus test for whether you're a good player at this game at this point. Because I think Omen is so versatile. He can be an initiator, he can be a fragger, he can be a duelist, he can be a smokes, he can be an anchor. I think if you're insanely good at Omen, I think that is like you're a good Valorant player. Like you're a good Valorant player. You're not just a
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's FNATIC. Let's quickly do G2 and Trace. G2 have to be disappointed, right? I mean, to not win a map in playoffs, big disappointment for them. To finish the season, obviously finishing third in Master Shanghai. A lot of people would have had them, being up there. So what do you think for G2? What's the next steps for G2?
So I guess first things first, I have to give them some flowers because this is an Ascension team that made top 8 at Champs and top 3 at Masters. Yep. That's an incredibly, incredibly good season for a team that was tier 2 last year. I think they had kind of a bad matchup in both of their games. I think that playing a regional Lev team who already knows you and kind of matches up well against you is bad for G2. I think they could have beaten, a Trace. I think they could have beaten a DRX. I think they could have even beaten like a Sentinels or maybe even an EDG potentially. It's possible. Lev's a bad matchup. And then FNATIC is maybe even a worse matchup because FNATIC plays the same kind of slow, controlled style, but probably just has like slightly better, more experienced players in almost every single position. So I think the two teams that they played were maybe the worst two teams that they could have played at this tournament in the playoffs. But also they definitely kind of fell apart in lower round 2. I think we saw a little bit of like the pressure get to them, maybe like the exhaustion of the grind of the season. And I think I'm not one of these people. It's like they must replace Icy. He's like put any duelist in and this team becomes incredible. I don't think that narrative is necessarily correct, but he also didn't play particularly well in their final series. So I think that needs to be said. Overall, good season for them, but certainly disappointment in this tournament, I think.
Yeah, and then Trace, I'll just quickly tell you about Trace because you won't need to say anything other than this. Trace were Ascent and Bind merchants, and their bind got figured out, and people just banned Ascent against them, and then they had no maps, which was always the case. It's just that teams, particularly Lev, trolled the map veto the first time that they played, and for some reason decided to play Ascent against them rather than Abyss, which makes no fucking sense. And they cost themselves that game because of that, Lev. So congratulations to you. But yeah, that's pretty much Trace.
Okay.
That's who they are. Okay, that is Champs done. Done. It's over. Champs gone. To the wind.
Okay.
There is some more things to talk about though. I think next we should talk about the new agent.
Yeah, we should. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Champs meta or anything like that, or should we just move on?
Let's move on.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Move on.
Vyse.
We got a whole off season to talk about metas and stuff.
True.
Yeah, let's talk about Vyse. Is it Vyse? Vyse?
Vyse.
I think it's Vyse. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Vyse, as in like you're caught in a vice.
Yes. Yeah. I got it.
As in like it's a sentinel that catches you and traps, so it's like a vice.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think that she is good. I haven't played her. I've only seen a couple of teasers. A tiny, like 3 minutes of your stream was all I could really handle. But yeah, I mean, I think her kit is unique enough to be
Hmm.
like a nice flavor on the Sentinel role, but also
Yes, very
close
much
enough
so.
to other Sentinels to where you can kind of slot her into certain maps and she will have impact. Um,
Yeah,
I think that uh, she has enough like she has enough info to where like it's okay to
yeah,
maybe run a solo Vyse, but probably she
yes,
functions best in dual Sentinel comps because she also
yeah,
has an initiator flash and an initiator ultimate. So you can kind of get a
yeah.
little bit of aggression, like attack power out of a Sentinel, but also functions enough as a Sentinel to like make sense.
Yeah, from having played it, one thing that's really good about Vyse, which I think is also, as you were kind of alluding to, which is really good about Omen, is that when you play Omen, you can play Omen super aggro if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
but also super passive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you want to just hide behind your little one ways and wait for them to exec into the site, and then you Omen flash everyone and they all push back, and then you one way them again, and they've used all their utils, so they can't get past the one way this time. Like,
Yeah.
you can do that as Omen, or you can go and fucking flash someone and TP behind them and knife them if you want. Right? The same is kind of true with Vyse, where you can put the same flash in certain positions and it could just be for info, right? Like you could put it down, be long on bind,
Mm-hmm.
and you could just do it for info and just flash people. Are they there or not, right? And be sitting behind your whole setup, or you can do it as a flash reclear and you're charging out with two other people, right?
Yeah.
And your gecko's flashing up ahead as well, and it's the same flash, right?
Right.
And so it's difficult to know what's about to happen if you're the opponent, right? Do I need to Omen flash you? Like, oh, I've got flash. Do I need to react? Do I need to flash back myself? You don't know, right? So that I think is just very strong in that there is multiple ways of playing it. Also, there is going to be some hilarious combos with Killjoy. Like Killjoy Vyse defensive
Yeah.
combos
Locking
is
people into a little box with nanoswarms.
yes,
So
you lock them into a box with an alarm bot and two nanoswarms,
yeah.
and it's free. And like there are
Yeah.
good places that you can do it that people always play in, right? Like you
Yeah.
can do it in Hell on Haven A.
Yeah.
Like post plant, someone is going in Hell,
Yeah.
right? They're
And then you
almost
just like
always going in
breach
Hell.
aftershock it and then just
Yeah,
they
and you wall them
can't
in
escape.
and
Yeah.
you have to shock them, nanoswarm them, whatever. Like
Yeah.
there is a lot of like that is a kill. You are just in a 5v4. So if you're playing
Yeah.
a retake A setup, that's incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, there's a lot of things you can do like that. I do think that probably the difference on whether Vyse will be good on a map or not will be how much value can you get from the attacking flash? Is there enough places you can put it where you're still getting info if someone's there, it's still getting off without being shot?
Yeah.
Because I felt like on some of the maps, like on Bind, for instance, I was like, where would I put this where someone's not just gonna instantly shoot it? Right. And
Yeah.
there's not much I can do about it. Like that was kind of the one problem I felt like sometimes that you would get. Defense side, I think Vyse is just good. Like
Yeah.
it holds down the site pretty well.
Breaks
You
up their
know,
attack like almost
breaks
100%
with
of
their
the time
attack.
with
Like
the
yeah,
wall. Yeah.
defense side,
Yeah.
pretty much on any map, defense is going to be pretty good. But it's just on the attack whether on some maps I felt like, oh yeah, you could put it here and no one's going to destroy that straight away, and it'll get you info if someone's like for instance Sunset, right? You could just put it in B main before like on the window B main, where like a cipher cam goes. You can put it there before the barriers. They don't see it. You can just flash it at any time. At the start of the round, see if someone's there.
Yep.
Continually do it if they don't destroy it, right? Like it's fine. Or in mid, like there's a lot of different walls you can put it in mid, that people probably won't destroy straight away because you can put it so high. So like on certain maps, it seems pretty decent. So I would my suspicion, and as you said, I really really like that. This is a Sentinel that feels different.
Yeah.
Like it still feels Sentinel in the like defense side good, but it does feel quite different in that there seems to be more options to do stuff with, I guess,
Hmm.
which is cool. And as you said, you could play it still as a solo sentinel, and the reason for that is you can still use the wall just as a trip on attack if you
Yep.
want.
The wall can be a trip.
And
The
I think
flash can literally just be a cipher camera, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's really important though that the wall could just be a trip because
Yeah.
it still means from the opponent's perspective, like I can't just always be flanking.
Yeah.
I can't just come this thing because there could be a trip there, right? And then and then the funny thing about the wall is when the trip goes up, it's like if you're past it, it's like, well, now I can't go back.
Yeah.
You just have to go forward, which is quite funny. And so they know you are flanking, right? They know you're coming from that kind of direction.
How long does it
Uh,
last for? Is it six
I think
seconds?
it's
Something like that? 7?
6 or 7 seconds. Yeah, so unless you're just gonna sit there for 6-7 seconds, which I doubt you will.
Right.
Most of the time you won't. People get bored. You'll just run forward.
In ranked, they will continue pushing 100%.
Yes, 100%. Don't worry about it. They're not going back. Yeah, so I think it'll end up being a pretty this to me is the first like good agent they've released in fuck knows how long. I mean, Gecko
Since
was
Gecko.
okay. Yeah, Gecko. I would say that the initial power level is better than Gecko, an initial Gecko,
Mhm.
right, where it was the 2-second pickup and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, I would say that this is like an actual good agent. Gecko, I would say, was okay when Gecko first came out, but
Mhm.
needed the buff to be good. So yeah, this is maybe the first good agent that is also not broken. Like, it's not crazy,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's not gonna break the game. But maybe since, like, I mean, what Fade was, I guess, maybe too good. Below
Yeah.
Fade, below pre-Fade, but it's gonna be good. This is the first good agent they've released in some time, and I'm happy for that. Thank fuck they finally got the power level right. I think on an agent.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, but it does seem like basically the maximum value you get out of Vyse is when you combo with another agent at least. Like you want to be
Yeah,
running this with like a duo, whether it's you
yeah.
run it with a duelist,
Killjoy,
like
Raze.
like arrays that
Yeah,
can capitalize on stuff, or somebody that can amp damage. I think is really good because obviously if you can make like the whatever the razor vine is that the trips
yeah.
with the or
No, the
not trips
Razor
like
Vine is the little
the nano
the thing.
swarms.
Yeah, the Nanoswarm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Razor Vine.
If you
Yeah,
can make them do more damage, I think that's kind of nice, right? Like let's say
yeah,
you throw a clove metal as they execute, and then they're forced to either take an insane amount of damage potentially, maybe
yeah,
die because like they don't do enough damage to where it's super dangerous. But if they're double
yeah,
damaged, or they're at like 50% health or something like that, it's actually pretty scary.
yeah,
Or they have to stand there in the choke point and get
yeah.
annihilated.
Well, that's why I think Killjoy Alarmbot with a
Yeah,
Nanoswarm and one of them is
yeah,
just like you can't stay there because the Nanoswarm.
yeah,
If you move, you're also taking double damage, and
yeah,
the Nano's going to deal some damage to you as well. So it's just like you're just dead. And
yeah.
Brim ults as well, locking people in with Brim ults
Yeah, and I mean,
is
I
funny.
I feel like there's like some cool potential to make some different metas with this character because you do have
Yes.
that aggressive flash on a sentinel role, and you have that
Yeah.
secondary initiator, um, and even just like the post plant fortification. Like that was kind of the thing about like the deadlock comp, why it was good on attack. The deadlock cipher
Yeah.
comp is because
Oh yeah, some
you
of the
you
post
fortify
plants
the
will be
site,
done.
but
You win.
now like the post plant utility is like it's like multiple layers of slow potentially. You've got like a flash
Yeah.
to counter play. You've got the wall maybe stopping the retake. Like yeah, I think it's
Oh
I think
yeah,
it's cool.
for the people who wanted to play Deadlock on Ascent, what they really wanted was Vyse.
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
was the agent that they actually wanted, where you still actually have a flash as well,
yeah,
and you have like it gives you some information as well. Like it's that's what they were really just preempting the whole time.
yep,
If you wanted to do that, so yeah, that's Vyse. We also have a bit of news. Do you want to run down some news?
yeah. Let's we got I mean a few roster moves that we need to talk about.
Go on.
Um, so I guess really real quick we can talk about Secret and Wolves both making roster moves. Plix out of Wolves, NDG out of Secret. These are both, I wouldn't say they're like kind of like main star players for the team, so kind of I suppose expected for teams that didn't meet expectations, needed to make some moves. Global Esports has made their entire roster free agents. Any thoughts on any of these three?
I'll just quickly go on GE that I think eh, I mean, it's expected, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times are you just gonna get rid of everyone and just kind of restart this thing over and over and over again? Maybe not unexpected, but what like I
You
don't
got to
know.
build from
I just,
somewhere, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
start somewhere.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then maybe the biggest news is that Laz has retired from Valorant, which was kind of hinted at the end of last year, I think, that it might be coming time because I think he's 29, 28, 29, something like that.
Hmm.
So I mean, certainly not like old, but in esports terms, definitely up there. Talk to me about Talk to me about Laz and what this means for Japanese Valorant as a whole.
So Laz is probably like Laz is an iconic player.
Yeah.
Laz is an iconic Valorant player, and even if it was just essentially because of one tournament,
Yeah.
um, that run in Reykjavik, and this is what I mean, kind of like bringing it back to EDG. Like what EDG just did,
Hmm.
we should be looking at like what Zeta Division did at Reykjavik. Like
Yeah.
it's a similar level considering EDG won the tournament.
Yeah.
But for some reason, people don't seem to think like, or what I've seen so far, like no one seems to think like that. That this Zeta Division run was seen as like so historic and so monumental, right? That
Yeah.
this team somehow did this, right? And just out of nowhere, Japanese Valorant had been in the absolute bin. And I think that this really, that moment was, we know that Japan now is, the most passionate viewing region in
Yeah.
all of Valorant.
Yeah.
They fucking love it. And let's be real, it probably started with that tournament.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that they finished third and Laz was, such a huge part of that.
Yeah, I mean the
And
emotion that he would show, like
yeah,
his leadership on stage, like
the nice,
yeah,
him screaming nice.
yeah, all of the stuff that made that run so iconic was kind of like started and ended with Laz for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And so losing him is a big, big loss to uh just the Japanese scene. It kind of feels weird that, he's not gonna be on. How long has he been on Zeta Division? I mean,
I mean, since the team formed,
since
because
yeah, since they formed. Yeah.
yeah,
So literally, uh, there is no Zeta Division without Laz. But now there will be, and it will be a bit strange. And obviously, as it's gone on, who knows? Maybe this will end up being a good thing in the long run, right? For the actual team results, because maybe they need some kind of big shakeup, because obviously it's been going in the wrong direction for Zeta Division, which I think, and I know you think this for sure, but a lot of other people do as well. That Valorant is better when Zeta Division are good.
yeah,
Like there are so many people outside of Japan that root for this team. Um, and want this team to, be good because, I mean, again, literally just because they had one amazing tournament run, basically.
yeah,
And since then, everyone has just wanted this team to be insane.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a little. So obviously, like it's sad to see kind of like an icon of the game leave, but also I think I'm a little worried that there isn't like a next level of Japanese
Yeah.
Valorant coming up. I know that there are some pretty good teams in like tier 2, like Riddle Order has been really good. But I just don't know whether Japanese Valorant like has the talent pipeline to really sustain two VCT level teams. Um I hope it does because like you said, and even it's crazy that even now, even though like both Zeta and DFM and just like Japanese Valorant hasn't been good in tier 1 for like 2
Hmm.
years now, right?
Yep.
Um but like their ascension is still being watched a lot, which is good, but
Oh, by far the most. More,
yeah,
way more than any other league.
but how long does that sustain is the question. Like without
Mm.
success, how
Yeah.
long is their interest without success?
Yeah.
Maybe it'll keep going on. Maybe they just really love the game. But I think anytime you don't have like, moments to like re-hype up the
Yeah.
interest in a game, you're always, I mean, there's every single game studio out there is trying to pull your players away, trying to pull your interest away, right? So you need something that's keeping you reinvigorated in your interest. Um, Deadlock is coming out, right? This Valve shooter. Um, Japan is big in like Rainbow Six and PUBG and Apex. There's all other shooters that can start pulling players away from Valorant if it becomes kind of like a
Yeah.
dead end career. So I hope that the next level that there will be like another Japanese Cinderella run to kind of allow this region to continue the interest and the excitement that it had from the Zeta Division run. And so I'm really looking at both Zeta and DFM to kind of like let's make some fucking moves, boys. Like we can't have 5 wins between an entire region, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Japan being a region, like you can't have 2 slots in VCT well, India has one slot with 1 billion plus people, right? And have 5 wins to show for it. Like that can't happen. You have to have at least one good team from your region, otherwise people are going to stop caring.
Yeah, hopefully it will sustain though, and like once we start getting long term, of course, if you're a 13-year-old Japanese kid and you see, like Valorant is popping off, if it does sustain, if the viewership is still there, right, and people are still really interested in Valorant, even if the talent maybe now is not there, if it is still there in 5 years' time, there will be some good Japanese players. Because if enough people are watching it, and you're like and the game is known well enough in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
then if you are that 13-year-old, and you're getting into a game, and you choose Valorant, and you just play Valorant for 5 years with the hope of I'm going to be the guy that's going to change Japanese Valorant,
Yeah.
then you're going to end up with probably some pretty good players. But as you say, if it does start to die off because there's not enough, good teams in the recent times, then yeah, maybe they'll go somewhere else, right? But I think hopefully, and I part of me thinks that it will, just because like it's not just the tier 1, that they fucking love tier 2 as well. They just
Yeah.
love Valorant.
Yeah.
Which just makes me think like, okay, if you love Valorant that much, then hopefully you'll stay, no matter what. But yeah, if I
I'm
was
actually
Riot,
curious, looking at the Ascension, how many. Okay, so Riddle Order has 2 Korean players on it. Fennel is full Japanese. They were the second place. Sengoku Gaming is 2 Korean players. Scars is another pretty big name. They have 0 Japan. They have 1 Japanese player. Varel is 2 Korean players. Mirage Gaming. These are like the playoff teams.
Yeah.
Mirage is full Japanese. So, there is talent out there. It does seem like teams that have Korean players tend to be a little bit better, maybe overall. But yeah, I don't know. I'm certainly hopeful. Like, it would suck to lose a fan base like this, because Japan tends to not care about PC games competitively that much. So
I think if I was Riot, like Masters Tokyo was such a success
yes,
that I think I
they
would
need to go
definitely
back.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah, like, and no one would complain. I mean, I might complain about what time it starts, but
right.
no, I wouldn't complain about the decision. I would think that's good, because you have a massive fan base here who is definitely going to turn up. And you talk about like putting it in an arena for 7 days. If any place is going to fill it out, it probably would be Japan.
Yeah, I just hope that because like a lot of people are fans of teams because of a player, right?
Yeah.
People are fans of Sentinels because of TENS first. Like, if we're just being honest, Sentinels would not be a big brand without TENS, like straight up. At this point, they would not be as big a brand as they are. Is Laz the TENS of Japan? And would Sentinel, if TENS retired today, how popular would Sentinels be next year? Is my question.
Oh, they would lose a big chunk. Not, I think now it wouldn't be as bad. I
Yeah.
think if you would have asked me last year, I would have said, "Oh, they're in the fucking pit. No one gives a shit about anything else."
Yeah.
Now that they've had some success again, I think that those just 10 fans have kind of, and because of Tarek as well, like those just 10s fans probably became full Sentinels fans,
Right.
because of some of those things. But yeah, had you asked me last year, I would have been like, Sen will have, no one will give a shit.
Yeah.
This team will be like the Cloud9. No one will, people will just be like, okay, cool. They'll have some fans. That'll be it. Okay, is that it?
You trying to end
Is
the
this
episode?
marathon over? Is it? I don't know. You tell me. Is there more news?
I mean, we could just talk about Valorant. How you doing? How's your rankings going?
We're what? I don't know how long we are into this episode, but for you to now, after however long this episode has been going on, just to say, oh, well, we could just talk about Valorant if you want.
No, we'll let you guys go. This has been our Champions recap episode. I mean, I guess we'll talk about Ascension in our next one, probably, because Ascension will be in the middle of happening or maybe over at that point, because 2 weeks from now.
They're on at different times, I think. But yeah, we'll
Yeah.
definitely be talking about Ascension. These next couple like weeks, I'm gonna be very much cluing in and watching some games of all the teams, to try and get as much knowledge as I can about what they're doing and what they're up to.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll make sure that I'm knowledgeable about Ascension. And I will just say about Ascension as well, one thing that, of course, again, next year, of course, a lot of people are disheartened about the changes that are coming to Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that next year viewing Ascension should be better because there'll be a team that or maybe even
Right.
two teams
The
that
relegation of
yeah, yeah,
ECG team. Yeah.
yeah, they'll be in there. At least in some teams will, some teams might not, but some teams will be in there, and so you'll have at least some sense of like, oh well, I know about how good this team actually is. So if they lose, I know that this team that they lost to is pretty good, etc. So yeah,
Did we ever figure out what happens if both of the Ascension teams make champs top 8?
yeah, whoever finishes worse goes into Ascension.
Even if even if it's literally winner and second
Yeah,
place of
I mean,
champs.
if that happened, fuck me, there'll be a fucking riot. But probably that won't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, whoever finishes lower, and I guess if they
Okay.
finish in the same place, then it'll be just on their record, in their
Okay.
region.
Okay. So things
Yeah,
could get silly, but they probably won't. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And knowing the way that the Ascension has kind of gone for Riot, it probably will get silly. So congratulations, gentle mates, for winning champs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
we'll
I mean,
see.
I guess one last thought on Ascension is just that, I mean, what was it? 40 players from tier 2 played in VCT this year, something like that.
Oh yeah,
I think a
that's a
lot of
big
that was in like the Chinese region, but there were definitely, I mean, we had like narrates and
yeah. There's a
obviously
lot of flux.
Riens and Wu. Like there's
Woot,
a
yeah.
crazy amount of talent out there. So make sure that you guys are watching Ascension, and we'll do some episodes on it in the coming weeks. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you soon. This has been Elevated and TMV signing out.